Hey everyone, glad you're back. Glad you could tune back in for another parable, study on the parable and a year in the red from Ant Ministry. I hope everything's going okay this past week. Hope you survived that whole storm thing. Glad you tuned in, but so we don't waste any time, let's go ahead and get into it. You know what, before we get into it, I was going to tell you, I don't know if any of you guys have ever watched, that fishing show from Alaska, like The Deadliest Catch or something. And before we get into this parable, there's something that as I was reading this parable, it sort of caught my mind. I don't know if you've ever watched that Deadliest Catch, but what happens is they actually take these baskets and they bring them on the boat, in the Bering Sea, where they're trying to catch crabs. And then they have some people that sit there and they sort through them to find out which one's the biggest, and they throw the other ones back. If you can imagine those type of fishing, if you can imagine that type of fishing, like they call it fishing for crabs, the Alaskan king crabs. If you can imagine that as we read this parable, just keep that in your mind. The parable is actually found in Matthew chapter 13, verse 47 through 50. It's been labeled the parable of the dragnet or the parable of the fishing net, and it's all based on fishing. To set the scene a little bit, Jesus had actually been talking about parables to the crowd, and he had talked about a parable to the crowd, and as later on he got sort of quiet and alone with his disciples, and they were sitting there and they asked him, they said, Jesus, can you tell us a little bit more about that parable? Well, he described that parable to them earlier in Matthew 13, but then he goes on and he starts talking more about what the kingdom of heaven is like. And if you can imagine the scene here, it's Jesus is really having a very nice, calm conversation with his disciples, telling them what's going to happen in the end of the days, what's the kingdom of heaven like. And so he starts off these parables going, the kingdom of heaven is like, the kingdom of heaven is like. And it's just like his other parables, but this one, if you can imagine, he is just talking to his disciples here. And let's go ahead and I'll read it to you. It says, again, Jesus talking to his disciples, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was cast into the sea and gathered some of every kind, which, when it was full, they threw into the shore, and then they sat down, and they gathered the good into the vessels, but they threw the bad away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels would come forth, separate the wicked from among the just, and cast them into the furnace of fire, where there'll be wailing and gnashing of teeth. And talking about getting a little bit serious there with Jesus, wailing and gnashing of teeth. What Jesus is really discussing here as he's telling his disciples, so listen, there's going to be an end day. And during that end day, whenever those things take place, here's what's going to happen. Angels are going to separate the good from the wicked. And what's our definition of good? That goes into a whole other parable and other things that Jesus talks about. But what we need to focus on this parable is something that's very important, something that will happen. There's going to come a day, and there will actually be angels that separate. It says, the kingdom of heaven, this is what's going to happen. Angels will separate, just like those fishermen do with the fish, just like they do on the Deadliest Catch with those crabs that really don't make it. They separate the good, those that do make it, to those that don't. They call it. They just call it and determine which one's good and which one's bad. And then it says, and the good are going to be kept into the vessels. Or in this term, in Jesus' parable, the good will make it to heaven. The good will be kept for, there's a process. But it doesn't say that the bad are just thrown back to be caught again at a later time. It said, Jesus talks about in this parable, he says some of every kind will be gathered. There will be a time of judgment where he looks and says what's good and what's bad. And then what takes place is he calls it, we keep the good, and when the bad, he says we get rid of it. We throw it in the trash. We throw it in a fiery furnace. We throw it in a lake of fire where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Right there, Jesus goes a little bit deep. He starts talking to us about hell. Jesus describes hell the same way he's described in a whole other places in the Bible. He doesn't say hell. He just said there's going to be a place, not where there's an ultimate death, but where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus in this parable tells us in a very short, just 3 verses, Matthew 13, verses 47 through 50, Jesus clearly states there's going to be a judgment time. I guess my question to each one of you, how it relates to me, how it relates to you, what it makes me think is, listen, I've got some friends that I know these friends that if that judgment was to take place today, if that fishing net was cast out and brought to the shore today, some of those people are my friends would be cast aside. God. Instead, these are going to the weeping and gnashing of teeth. And the sad part about it is I know how to get them to be so that they're separated to the good side. It's the gospel. I know that all I need to do is share the gospel with them and them to accept it. It's not just, I can't force them to accept the gospel, but if they have ears, then that means that I'm supposed to be teaching them. They need to hear it from someone like me or someone like you. That's what Jesus places here for. There's going to be a time of judgment. Many of us, maybe somebody like you, maybe somebody in your family, maybe some of your friends, somebody you know might not make it, and you know they won't. And so what I'm saying is, it's our responsibility. That's what our job is. Jesus is telling us in 3 verses, there is going to be a judgment day that has to affect us. I challenge you guys this week, think about that. Read it over. Read over Matthew 13, verses 47 through 50. Think about it. Tell me how you think it pertains directly to you. Just remember this. Jesus is pretty clear, and this is Jesus talking to His disciples. Hey, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have any comments, anything, be sure and just post it on our Facebook page. Hope you guys have an awesome week. Remember that we're praying for you guys. If there's anything we can do, any ways we can specifically pray, please let us know. You can email us. You can just message us on Facebook. It doesn't really matter. Hey, until next time, until next week, we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to Ant Ministries, A Year in the Red, to study the parables of Jesus. Thanks a lot. See ya.